Hi guys, my name is Edwin. I'm a tech guy, but I'm also very much into personal effectiveness. I've been writing about that online for a couple of years now. I have my own newsletter called the Do It newsletter, and I write about productivity systems, apps, tools, and methods to make me more effective. In fact, I'm currently writing a book condensing all of my main insights on the topic. And this book is primarily based on the philosophy of critical rationalism, or, well, more specifically, the worldview of David Deutsch. And David Deutsch is a quantum physicist, but he's actually much more than that. He's an author of two amazing books that explain really how the world works and gives probably the best account of the explanations, the deepest fundamental explanations of reality that exists. The first book of David Deutsch, The Fabric of Reality, which is the darker one that I have here behind me, explains reality in terms of four strands of reality: evolution, physics, computation, and epistemology, so the theory of knowledge. And the theory of knowledge is, I think, or in my opinion, the most important one, because it really underlies everything, and it says something about how strong our knowledge is, or what really our knowledge is. And that is also the theory of knowledge of Karl Popper. It's fallibilism or critical rationalism. And David Deutsch's second book goes beyond this and really offers also an optimistic twist to it, and a very positive message, namely that all problems are solvable. As humans, we are uniquely capable to solve all problems with our creativity. And since the Enlightenment started 300 to 400 years ago, we've been really at the point which he calls the beginning of infinity, so the beginning of open-ended progress, infinite progress, and problem solving, and solving our problems. And that also includes just our day-to-day problems, like our health problems, or solving death itself at some point, making societies that are more just and fair, and getting rid of bad actors quicker. All of this is encompassed in this very wide philosophy and description that David Deutsch gives. When I first read these books, they were really almost world-changing. I always really wanted to make the connection between the scientific effects or descriptions of how reality works, and how can I translate those to like actionable real-world applications. That was always my goal in my own personal passion. And then when I read David Deutsch, it really clicked tremendously, because he underlined everything with the epistemology of critical rationalism, and therefore like a very good description of how knowledge works and what really is objective knowledge, and how to compare two scientific theories or two ideas, and be able to objectively tell which one is better than the other. So this is, of course, what underlies, if you want to have a good explanation of how the world works, you need this underlying framework of explanation. What is a good explanation? And this is what I really got from that, and that also inspired me to condense it into the book I'm working on. But for today, I actually wanted to touch on a slightly different subject, namely why there is quite little practical or prescriptive advice out there when it comes to people that follow critical rationalism. For instance, David Deutsch himself, he's notoriously hesitant to give advice, and actually for very good reasons. And I wanted to kind of go into the valid reasons why you could have to not want to give advice on certain topics if you consider yourself a critical rationalist or a fallibilist. So I'll first explain that, and then at the end I will try to convey why I think my book can still be of service in bridging a gap from these amazing fundamental explanations to real world, everyday life situations, how you can apply that. Okay, but first we'll start with the first reason why I think advice giving is generally not done as much in the critical rationalism, and that is that, well, the source of knowledge is always conjectural, according to critical rationalism. So it's always a guess. You guess how something works, you have this idea in your head and you're shaping it, you're criticizing it, and then you're kind of making a model or an explanation of why something is the way it is. This is a real different way of looking about knowledge theory. This has only emerged in the last 100 years or so, and before that we had many other mistaken views. First and foremost is like pointing to a divine source of knowledge, where like, yeah, this is the way it is because God said so, and then maybe specific scholars were also pointed to as like, no, those guys, Socrates, they know that's the strongest form of knowledge we have. So that was always pointing to different sources of the knowledge, or authorities, as the ones that are like justifiably the ones that make something true or not. Something is only true if the authority says so. Empiricism actually is a great step forward. It rejected authority as a valid source of knowledge, but it kind of inserted a different intermediary, namely experience and observation, so that became the authorities. We somehow we download or observe what's going on, and then we can download it, and our body somehow processes it, and then we have absorbed some knowledge from the environment. It's not quite how it works, but we're definitely a step forward from authority-based claims of how knowledge works. So now let me just tie this back into why then critical rationalists do not really want to give or shy away sometimes from giving advice. It is that if you profess you should do this, or you should when you're in your 20s you should definitely go and explore the world, etc. If you gave this kind of advice as an authority figure, you're undermining the explanation, because you are like known as the individual. Like David Deutsch is known as a very wise and smart man who has created a lot of theories, so he's, I think, hesitant to then also give advice, because he wants actually people to not take people's word for it, don't take the authority's word for it, instead look critically at the explanation of the mechanism I'm explaining, and then interpret your own worldview. So by not giving these kind of advices, you protect, or you don't have the risk of you yourself becoming an intermediary source of authority, which then, you know, it kicks the can further down the road. You want to be reducing authority-based epistemology in the long run. This is the first reason. I think a second one is that all problems are super context dependent, and therefore also very personal. So if I want to lose weight or get wealthier, some of the typical problems, I can look for like a prescriptive approach or prescriptive advice on like what I could do, but that it's rarely as simple as just following a simple step plan or a simple this or that. The beauty or the difficulty lies in the nuance, in the specific situation that I'm in, like the family members that depend on me, or my current financial situation and my emotional state, my temperament, my traumas I've gone through. A problem to be solved really is very person dependent, so therefore giving advice, which is basically a solution, is not a great way to help someone on their path. It can actually confuse a lot. It can make people follow something, but they don't really know why and if it's going to help. So it kind of leads them astray, instead of telling an individual, hey, this is how the mechanism of wealth creation works, this is how the economy works, this is how trade-offs work, this is how human psychology works, like evolutionary psychology. Not that it's deterministic, but all of these things, if you understand those mechanisms or the explanations that underlie all of these human behaviors, then you are actually equipped to solve the problems yourself, instead of looking for this bite-sized solution that is not tailored to your specific context. And that also leads me now to the third reason why I think we don't hear people like David Deutsch give advice too often. And that is also because giving advice is saying, this is a solution, you should try. And maybe it's not as forcefully as like, you should try, but it's definitely saying, this is the solution to a problem, try it out. And what you're then ignoring is if that individual really wants this solution to this problem. What I mean by that is everybody has their own desires, and it's not very easy actually to figure out what you want to do in life and what results you wish to attain or what problems you want to solve in the short term. And by taking advice from someone else, you run a risk of doing something or following advice which actually you don't really like doing as much. So it can also again waste your time, lead you astray, even if the intentions are 100% aligned. So if you're 100% convinced you want to lose weight, and this advice is specifically telling you to lose weight, even then there's a risk where the solution or the advice that the individual gave becomes the intermediary that you view as the goal. So instead of like the target of losing the weight being the goal, no, it's now following the plan. You begin to measure your success by how well you're executing the plan and not by why you wanted to be doing the plan in the first place. And that is a very common occurrence in modern society a lot, is that there's a lot of people always out there giving prescriptions, giving advice on how to become more spiritual, how to become more healthy, how to become more smart, all these things that sound very appealing to individuals, but which, if you really question what you want to reach some state, and like getting clarity on that state is more important than constantly trying out every new solution or tool in the tool shed to get there. And this is, I think, the last reason why giving advice is not actively done by those in the critical rationalist community. Because, yeah, you're basically claiming, I know better, try this thing and it will lead to results. Okay, so what then is the right way to approach someone or to help someone who wants to get somewhere? And that is, of course, by explaining to them the explanation of how something works so that they can therefore formulate their own statement of their problem, formulate their own understanding of the environment, formulate their own opinion of what the correct solution would be in that case. And then there's all internal buy-in. There's no coercion going on. So the 4 acts, the book I'm working on, what it intends to do is give the fundamental explanations of how reality works, how we can judge qualitatively how strong knowledge is, how evolution influences our decision making, how the laws of physics come into play when thinking about limits of what is possible and what isn't possible, and therefore what we should trust and distrust. Yeah, the book is aimed to bring those closer to each other, so the real world, and show where the fundamental explanations touch, and therefore informing the readers and first and foremost myself how we can use this knowledge to solve problems more effectively. Well, thank you for listening today. This was my first video. I am really looking forward to publishing more over the coming weeks, months, perhaps even years, and to continue to progress hopefully also the quality of the videos. If you do want to stay involved and be up to date on new videos where I explain how the fundamental explanations of reality tie into our day-to-day experience and everyday problem solving, do subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Have a nice day.